All right, so here's back to you, Steve. Here's how would you go about making mobility changes during the season? For example, a high school pitcher who has poor thoracic extension. That's like we can apply this obviously to hitting or pitching, anything. But how do you approach that in season so it doesn't screw things up?
Well, that's very difficult because honestly, it will screw things up. There's a certain sequence to pitching, and if you find something's out of sync, sometimes it's better just to bite your tongue until the season's over. But unless we're talking about something that's a health issue. So if I see something that's a performance issue that you can't, with a verbal reminder, get it right, I'm going to leave it alone because that's a big change in the delivery of the baseball. I'm not sure on the hitting side, but definitely on the pitching side. You're talking about throwing a ball 60 feet, 6 inches, and you got to be within an inch and a half one way or the other. So if you're hitting a zone and you miss it by an inch and a half in towards the plate or an inch and a half away from the plate, at an amateur level, that's marginal. At a high college level or professional level, that gets pissed on, right? So I think anytime you're talking about those kind of changes in season, that requires a lot of thinking.
Well, let me give a little research on this. So something that's very, very clear in the research is that if you work on mobility within 45 minutes of their performance, so in other words, like let's say you're like, man, I really want to work on this spine extension. So before they get in the bullpen, we're going to do some stretching to loosen this up. And it's within 45 minutes to an hour of when they're going to go perform, we get a reduction in power typically, right? Now, this is almost in any sport, from a vertical jump to a basketball player to how hard they can kick for a soccer player to how fast they can swing a golf club to how fast you can throw a baseball. And the reason being, we did actually a couple shows with ESPN Sports Science on this, where we hooked our players up to motion capture, had them do some mobility, and then go perform their activity. And we got reduction in power and velocity. And the reason being is if you looked at the data, it actually works, right? You actually can get more range of motion in their mechanics. But like Steve said, they've never had any time to coordinate time and sequence this new motion. So, listen, if you can turn your shoulder, hip to shoulder separation more, and you can get more laid back, that's great, unless you don't know how to time and sequence this. And what we found is that usually the ability to learn how to use this new motion is what they lose. So it's more of a motor control problem. And that's where you'll see reduction in power in their performance. But now here's the good news is that's before you play, right? If it's within the hour, I agree 100%. You shouldn't bite your tongue, exactly what Steve said. But you can also work on this during practice, right? So that they learn how to control these range of motions, and then you probably won't see the negative deficits. And I do want to also say one other thing that's really important is that motor patterns are developed around physical limitations. If you don't have any mobility in your right hip, okay, well, maybe you'll sway because you can't internally rotate in your hip. Just because we take away the mobility problem in your right hip doesn't mean they're going to stop swaying. Because once you develop those motor patterns, I wish it was that easy. I wish they would go away. So sometimes you can actually do work in season and you're like, how come it's not showing up? Well, what it does is it gives you the ability to change it during the season if you want, right? So it doesn't always automatically screw you up. But I would be concerned, like Steve said, about doing any type of mobility changing right before a game, especially when a player hasn't had any ability to control this. If you put it as part of their practice program, they learn how to control this new range of motions, and it's not some new surprise that this range of motion, then you'll be okay. And that's always the dangerous thing about during the season is putting it in the right spot. That's where you would put it.
Hey, Greg, I got a little input on that too.
Yeah.
I think what could be even just a different mindset is if I start with a baseline of where they can move before the season even starts. And then through the season, if I see that it's getting limited and it's getting worse, then I would work on it. Not, again, like Steve said, never before the game. But like, let's just say I have a baseline before the season starts and they can rotate to X. And then now I'm 15 games in and all of a sudden we're losing that, right? Yeah. Then on Monday, I'm going to get in. I'm going to go see a guy like Anthony. And I'm going to be like, hey, Anthony, can you check this for me? See what's going on? This guy's starting to lose some thoracic because we're noticing it in the play. It's starting to go away. He's not even back to his baseline.
Yeah. Right? And getting it back to the baseline is not going to screw anything up. It's going to get you back more. Yeah. Love that.